Italy has become the first European country to ban AI bot ChatGPT. Rome said it had serious concerns over the privacy of its users. There are now signs other European nations could follow suit and block the app, which some have suggested could revolutionize how the modern world works. Welcome to the program. I'm Philip Hampsheir. OpenAI's ChatGPT promises so much. It can already write essays, plan businesses, and even code entire websites in the fraction of the time that a human being can. But it's making governments nervous as they look for ways to regulate the spread of artificial intelligence. Italy banned the chatbot, saying a data breach had put users' conversations and payment details at risk. ChatGPT is already inaccessible in a number of countries, including China, Iran, North Korea, and Russia. Now, the likes of Ireland and Germany, among others, are investigating the company. But are these bans really just about users' privacy? Joining me to discuss this in London, we have Inma Martinez, who's an AI pioneer and data scientist, who is one of the AI scientists who signed the Future of Life letter alongside Elon Musk and others, asking for a 6-month moratorium on new versions of ChatGPT. In Oxford, we're joined by Luciano Floridi, who's a professor of philosophy and the ethics of information at the University of Oxford. And in Edinburgh, we have Atoosa Kasirzadeh, who is a director of research at the University of Edinburgh's Centre for Technomoral Futures. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining me. Inma, if I can begin with you. ChatGPT recently got banned in Italy. I guess the first question is, why? And do you agree with the decision?
Well, they were banned because there was a data breach. So the private data, the personal details, the surnames, the names, the credit card details of Italian citizens were compromised. They were able to be seen by other users. And the Italian data protection authorities reacted very quickly, as they should have.
Do you think that this is a thing that the Italian government and various other governments across Europe will extend across to the other AI chatbots that are out there? Because there are more and more of them coming onto the marketplace. Not all of them, of course, getting a good deal of press now because it's become somewhat commonplace.
Remember, these happened because there was the data breach of Italian citizens. The European Consumer Organization has called all authorities to investigate, also if they have suffered from the same. Ireland's Data Protection Commission is following up on what the Italian agency is doing. In France, there's been 2 cases of data breach that the data privacy regulator in France is investigating. And here in the UK, the UK Information Commissioner's Office issued a warning to all companies developing generative AI for them to be extremely careful in their cybersecurity. So there's been a massive reaction, but it's European. It hasn't happened in North America or any other part of the world.
Luciano, not being an expert in the field, I don't want to appear slightly cynical about this, but to me, it almost looks like the European Union has come in here and thought, well, we'll try and ban them on the basis of privacy grounds, but that's because we can't really ban them for the reason we secretly actually want to ban them for, which is that we don't like them. Is that reasonable or is that too cynical?
No, I don't think it's completely right. But I'd like to put the record straight, if I may. It is not true, as a matter of fact, that the service has been banned or blocked in Italy because of the data breach. That's simply not the case. The 4 reasons officially provided by the Garante, and I was involved, as you may imagine, a bit Italian, a bit British, are 4 completely different reasons. No one mentioned the breach. When they mentioned the breach, they said, well, following the breach, we started inquiring, and the 4 reasons we have to ban or ask the suspension of the service are 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and we can go into them if you like. So there is a sense in which a slightly more critical view of the block is required. And I close here by saying probably an overstretch, a draconian use, an excessive use of the GDPR to cover something that should be covered, should be legislated, but not exactly with something that was not meant to do this job.
So what are those 4 points? Can you summarize them for us?
Oh, yeah, it's quite straightforward. The 4 reasons are, one, the unclear nature of the collection of data on which ChatGPT has been trained. 2, how the data collected when we interact with ChatGPT are being used. 3, there's something really strange, but I'm just reporting it. Don't shoot the messenger. That ChatGPT is not entirely reliable when it provides information. Wow, that is a surprise. And number 4, the age limit, which is not checked carefully enough. Apparently, ChatGPT is supposed to be available only for people 13 years old and up. That is not very well implemented. So these are the 4 reasons why the Garante, the sort of data protection agency in Italy, one in every European state, the Italian one, decided to require the immediate suspension of the service, which then generated a block.
Atoosa, what do you think of the ban by the Italians and the threatened ban that some other countries seem to be looking at this as well, including Germany? Obviously, ChatGPT, it's important to point out, has already been fully banned by several countries around the world, but those are fairly predictable countries such as China, North Korea, Iran, and so forth.
So if I may, I would like to kind of comment on the practical implications of this ban, because I'm not a legal scholar, and I think giving an honest comment about the usefulness or legal usefulness of this ban is really beyond my level of expertise. But I think I see this ban by the Italian government and other European countries to be an interesting point of friction for what for the acceptability of ChatGPT among many countries. And I think by this ban we are kind of seeing some points of concern raised by governments about the possible misuses in cybersecurity, in the emanation and the dissemination of misinformation and disinformation in the world. And I think, given that, I kind of personally like this ban, because this ban kind of pushes us to think about the kind of concerns that can be raised from the governmental points of views.
So in a way, you quite like the ban. As I was mentioning with Luciano a few moments ago, you like the ban almost because it's acting like a speed bump and it is slowing things down.
Yeah, so I just to avoid any misunderstanding, I don't think and I can't say that I like the ban on legal grounds. And I'm just suggesting that the fact that there are some governments banning a specific kind of technology in a very unregulated kind of world, in a world where we are really unsure about how we have to go to regulate this technology, there are some benefits into that, because on the one side of the discussion, there's lots of countries with minimal amounts of regulation. They are releasing these technologies and make us to get used to it and see the benefits of it. But I think practically speaking, it's good to see some points of kind of concerns coming from other governments. And that kind of helps us to have a more interesting landscape for discussion.
Inma, if we were to have, as we do in the studio today, a large number of experts in AI, a small percentage of those are extremely worried about the future of AI and what it might mean for the world. Elon Musk is a very common example of somebody with some technological expertise who sort of says, look, I'm really a little bit concerned about where AI is going. For any new technology that comes into the marketplace, if there are drugs, there are usually years of drug trials before it gets released into the marketplace. For cars, they have to meet certain safety requirements before they come into the marketplace. Even children's toys require a certain amount of safety and precaution. Is the marketplace, if you like, a little bit too libertarian, a little bit too free-for-all for chat AI bots because it's not quite being taken seriously enough? What do you think, Inma?
It's absolutely right. When ChatGPT was released to the world on September 22nd last year, I was one of the AI scientists that complained and raised lots of issues along people like Yann LeCun, who is, one of France's biggest AI scientists and the father of machine learning, and many other people. The company OpenAI put a prototype in the hands of real people. So we were complaining because of that, not because the development of generative AI should be stopped. We were concerned that very poorly trained models were being used by human beings and also without an instruction book. The company did not put a specific product or a service. It just released, a searchable window and kind of went along the lines of do whatever you want with it, which is why many people encountered very negative situations. Many people used it in ways that it was really useless and sometimes dangerous. And it was quickly recognized as a system that was very poorly trained. So yeah, I am on that side of the fence. It should have never happened.
Luciano, are you in the same position or not?
Middle ground, if I may, because I agree that it should have never happened. I completely agree. It did happen. It's a bit like the toothpaste. It's now out. Wishing it never came out? Absolutely. Putting it back in? Unlikely. So I'm much more in favor, rather than sort of a ban or a suspension for 6 months. Besides, if you read the letter, it's full of science fiction, so that's not really helpful. More legislation, more European legislation. If you now follow what is happening to the AI Act, which is the main piece of legislation in Europe on this, is going to be discussed by the European Parliament at the end of this month. Now, the letter doesn't even mention that. As of the sort of good intention of asking people to have more, for example, self-regulation, well, I can tell you that we've been doing this for a decade, at least. They never listen, not when the toothpaste was still in the right place, and I would be surprised if they will listen now. So I'm completely in favor of not saying, I wish it had never happened. I wish they could do something about it. It's not a good idea. Completely right. The question is, what do we do seriously about it? And I think a ban based on science fiction for 6 months is not going to change anything. In fact, as we can see, things are going ahead no matter what. I mean, every day we get more news about more large language models, so-called. ChatGPT is one of them, being produced by other companies, including China. So I'm not completely sure that that is the way forward. But as I said, I cannot disagree on the good intention.
Inma.
Sorry, the letter was not science fiction. The letter raised very important issues such as, should we let machines flood our information channels with propaganda? Should we automate away all of the jobs? Basically, the letter is saying, before we let all of these companies to continue releasing versions, governments and the general society have a responsibility to come together and say, excuse me, is this what we want? Should we do things this way or that way? And I signed the letter along thousands of other people because before this letter was out, there were the Asylum principles, which are 23 ethical principles that were created years before this event. The OECD AI group also publishes, principles that all of us are trying to follow, which is developing AI in trustworthy ways. So the letter did not have science fiction. It's only that the letter was asking for, let's just stop for a second, which is unprecedented. But I agree that we need to, otherwise the world of startups will flood the market. Just as an example, only in March, about 1,000 AI-based, generative-based tools have been put in the market. The PhD and the academics and everybody that develops these tools have gone bananas and have flooded society. And the letter was right in asking, do we want this? Should we run the future in different ways? It's an ethical decision.
Inma, do we not have a problem here that nowhere is big enough to be able to clamp down on this in the way that you seem to be indicating? Because let's say the United States decides to clamp down on it. Let's say the European Union clamps down on it. That's still a tiny minority of the world. The whole of Africa, the whole of South America. China is working on AI. Japan is working on AI. India is working on AI. Russia is working on AI. It doesn't matter how much you try and use it responsibly, release it responsibly in the West. As we've already heard from Luciano, the toothpaste is already out of the tube now.
Yes, and many other organizations have put claims on the event. For example, the Center for AI and Digital Policy in the US went even further. They wrote to the Office of Trade Commission and Protection of Consumers and demanded that OpenAI should be investigated. Basically, this has steered many things. And just like human cloning is illegal, as well as genetic modification of human DNA, we need to be serious and we need to demand that things are a bit more controlled. I agree that when something is out in the world, and especially the open source community is developing lots of these language models, you're not going to stop it. But we need to create a framework for conduct and protocols for conduct to actually demand a bit of common sense. We cannot, again, let the startups drive society like a Wild West for 20 years, and then we all start realizing that data is an important thing to govern. We're acting quicker now.
Luciano, I'm sure that you agree with that because nobody wants the Wild West.
Sorry, I don't.
You don't? Tell me your position.
That's empty rhetoric. You know, we've been working, as a community, when people today finally sign a letter, they should know that this debate is decades old. There is a huge amount of work. The CDI, you mentioned, I was a member. The OECD, I wrote part of it. The stuff that we're doing at the AI Act, there is my name on it. So we as a community have been around this for decades. To wake up today with a number of sort of flashy names and say, we should be doing something about it. Well, welcome to the real world. So where were you when we were doing all the work? No one is listening. So what I'm saying is we need legislation, not self-regulation, which is part of what the letter is suggesting. And we need self-regulation only so far as is something that combines with actual regulation. It's coming. So give time to time, and you will see that once we have the AI Act, all these problems, which obviously we have in this program today, because obviously the headlines are there. But once the headlines disappear and finally real work happens, people will discover that as a long-term, very serious process of legislating, of having a framework, legal framework around this stuff. And I completely agree that something needs to be done. That is the pointless nature of rhetorical questions. Who is going to shoot against the Red Cross and apple pie? No one. So, of course, we're going to legislate. Of course, we're going to do a decent job. Of course, you need big muscles like the EU, the US. Japan just told the AI society that unless privacy is protected, we're not going to allow these open AI services in our country. So it is happening. My sort of...
Luciano, hold on here a second, because is anyone big enough to legislate on this? Let's say the European Union passes legislation. Let's say not just the United States, let's say NAFTA passes legislation. So that's the whole of North America taken out of it. It doesn't matter. I go and get myself a VPN. And then, all right, you banned ChatGPT, but there are 1,000 other ones that I can go out there and download. I can be sitting in Botswana. I can be sitting in St. Helena. I can be sitting in Tristan da Cunha. And I can do what I like with my AI and release it out on the internet. Is anyone, not even the United Nations, can clamp down on this, can it?
It doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
For two reasons, quickly. One, first of all, you make it illegal. So all you're saying is, I can still do things illegally. Of course. But of course, you also run into the troubles of doing them illegally. Second, there is something called the Brussels effect that everybody knows about. Once we have now legislation that covers, for example, the EU or the US, both, or maybe the OECD, the rest of the companies follow, because it's much easier to live at that level of standards rather than having something different for every country whenever you want to do something messy around the world. So because of the Brussels effect, because you make it illegal, of course you can still do things wrongly. I mean, that's the real world. But at least you know that there will be serious penalties to do that. That is the world in which we want to live.
Atoosa, if the United States, let us presume for the moment that the West puts in place, and we'll disagree about what the word sensible means. I'm sure between four people we would have four opinions. But let's say the West puts in place sensible legislation to restrict or control or ensure that AI is safe. That still leaves large sections of the world out there that can rampantly ignore it. So what do you do in a situation like that? What's your view on the position?
Yeah, I think the letter was kind of like a radical reaction to a radical release of a technology, and we can see during a couple of months, like this technology has impacted words, and many jobs already are being impacted by this technology. So, given that regulation and legislation requires time, requires deliberation, requires getting agreements from many different parties within a specific nation state and all kind of entities required for passing a legislation. I think that kind of solution is necessary, but kind of not sufficient according to the people who wrote and signed this letter. And I also agree that the letter for me was not a piece of science fiction. It's true that there are a couple of people who signed the letters that has a previous kind of background in writing science fiction. But I found this kind of letter to be a radical reaction by the community of developers of this technology, or people who are technically literate for the development, to understand development of this technology. And they kind of wanted to say that, look, just having this like slow regulation and legislation is not enough. And the reason for it is that this technology is changing many things about humans. And so when this legislation happens, let's say in a couple of months, in a couple of years, a lot of things are already changed. For example, I think one of the concerns that I am personally very kind of worried about is that many malicious actors in the world, and let's be honest, they are not very few, they can use this technology to very easily produce convincing text that can be fed into propaganda machines and can kind of like result in the propagation of misinformation and disinformation in really, really sad scales, like very large scales.
Okay, Inma, I want to take this in a very slightly different direction at the moment, if I may. Obviously, over the course of the last few days, the truly horrifying news that AI can generate extremely good-looking television presenters and have them read the news without the necessity of having a human being in the studio is truly horrifying for some of us in this conversation. But the simple truth is, what do we do when AI does everything better than anyone can? Isn't that an impending problem, an impending existential problem for everything from truck drivers with self-driving trucks to journalists, to authors? Already you can take an author's work and I can feed Nobel Prize winning authors into ChatGPT and then come out of it and say, write me a novel, please.
Well, this is what we are trying to prevent. And we question if AI should do everything, or maybe we should allow humans to reach the splendor of their creativity. There's going to be a point in which AI will do so many things to perfection. But then we will ask ourselves, do we want a human to do this? Because you have a different take and a different modularity. And at the end of the day, human intelligence is biological, and we have 4 brains, not just one. So one of the things that we are looking at organizations such as the Global Partnership on AI, which actually the governments are members, and then there's a huge community of AI scientists asking themselves these questions. we prefer when humans allow themselves to be creative because the result is much better than the machines. But at the same time, we want a better life, and we want a life without mistakes and without errors and with precision, well, especially for healthcare and many dangerous activities in manufacturing. So we will decide if eventually someone wants a human presenter that maybe coughs, that maybe speaks jovially, and is not a robot. And I've seen some avatars that look amazing, but you always want the human. So I think in the future we'll have the choice, but also the responsibility. Many things will decide that is better, that continue to be within the human domain, even though machines could do them or could mimic something. We will choose to have a human doing it. It will be a future of choice and responsibility.
Well, thank you very much, everyone, for joining me. It was a fantastic discussion, but I'm afraid to say that's all we have time for. However, if you wish to see more discussion and debate from Roundtable, just head on over to YouTube and type in Roundtable TRT World. For now, from me here and the entire team, thank you for watching, and goodbye.